today's Plate of History Beans, I'll talk briefly about railroads and their role in the Civil War. In Chapter 23 of Hunting Charm, Doreen Tarwater continues her travels south, heading for Fort Worth. When she reaches the Red River, she comes upon a rail crew. I'll have a couple of segments about how railroads in the 19th century and first part of the 20th century helped drive our nation's economy. Today's brief history lesson, however, will deal most specifically with the ways that railroads played a role in the Civil War. I still recall a high school history teacher talking about how railroads and infrastructure won the Civil War for the North. Most historians agree that railroads played an important role in that war. In a larger sense, the Civil War ushered in a new, more modern way of waging war, thanks to railroads. In the early part of the 19th century, our nation was divided between North and South, not only by differing opinions about slavery, but also in terms of economic development. Southern economies in states like Alabama, the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, etc., were mostly agrarian. Farms that grew rice, cotton, grain, and tobacco and raised livestock. There were railroads in the South, but those rail systems were poorly developed compared to the North, where the economy was based on manufacturing of things like steel, textiles, and finished goods. This meant that when the war between North and South started, the Union Army had an advantage in terms of moving troops, weaponry, and supplies. Some historians call the American Civil War the first modern war. Before the Civil War, battles often took place near heavily populated areas. This was necessary because of the logistical effort needed to field a large fighting force. Armies require a lot of resources: food, shelter, reinforcements, and the people together organize and transport everything. If all you have are wagons, animals, and manpower, traveling great distances is difficult, so fighting near large population centers was the norm. Railroads solved many of those supply issues. During the Civil War, it was possible to fight battles in more distant, unpopulated areas. Military leaders could create centralized staging areas and dependably send their materials 200 miles in the same amount of time it would take horse-drawn wagons to travel 20 miles. Quite a difference. The effects of railroads and the advantage in rail service is perhaps most clearly illustrated by the 1864 campaign of General William Tecumseh Sherman. Sherman was a good tactician on the battlefield, but his real brilliance was his mastery of railroads, which he used to supply the army that fought at Vicksburg, Chattanooga, Atlanta, and made the famed March to the Sea that effectively ended the Civil War. According to Sherman himself, he had 4 groups of trains, about 160 rail cars, and with those he was able to move around 1,600 tons of material every day to supply his army of around 100,000 troops and 35,000 animals. At the same time, the railroad allowed for the transport of fresh troops to the battlefield and the transport of injured soldiers to hospitals in the North. Sherman employed his system for nearly 200 days from May to November of 1864. The Confederacy would not surrender until April of 1865, but their back was broken by Sherman's October 1864 march to Savannah. Sherman swept back through the Carolinas following the March to the Sea, destroying anything the South might use, scattering Confederate forces, leaving Robert E. Lee no choice but to surrender. It all happened in large part because of Sherman's use of railroads. Another factor that weighed heavily in terms of railroads during the Civil War was the North's commitment to improving their rail systems even during the war. As I've already pointed out, Northern rail systems were superior to Southern systems leading into the war. In the South, at the beginning of the war, much of the Southern rail system was already growing obsolete. Some Southern states had older tracks that didn't work with the newer rail systems. The Confederate rail network in the South used a variety of rail gauges including 4 feet 8.5-inch standard gauge and 5 feet broad gauge. This lack of a standard gauge made it difficult for trains from different companies to run on the tracks, so moving supplies and troops between southern states was a logistical trouble spot. Finally, the Union Army made a greater commitment to their Army Corps of Engineers. When Sherman drove into the South starting in the spring of 1864, Confederate soldiers worked covertly to sabotage supply lines, but the Union Army engineers were there to rebuild bridges, fix damaged tracks, and clear debris as needed. Conversely, the same Union Army of Engineers and Northern operatives conducted counter-sabotage and destroyed railroads and other supply lines in the South. The Confederates, with their disorganized Corps of Engineers, were much less successful at keeping supply lines open. As I've grown older, I've realized my old high school history teacher was right when he said railroads played a central role in the Union's victory over the Confederacy. I'll have more about railroads and their role in the development of the Old West in next week's Plate of History Beans. In particular, I'll be looking at rail crews, and what it might have been like to work on railroads when robber barons were growing rich and the West was expanding at a lightning pace. I may even mention one of my favorite TV westerns. That's it for today's Plate of History Beans. If you like my content, please subscribe to my channel and hit the like icon. I'll have links below with more info on railroads and their role in the Civil War. I'll also have a link to my author's page on Amazon. Now it's time for Chapter 23 of my book, Hunting Charm, a question she had to answer. Chapter 23, a question she had to answer. On the 8th day out, Doreen arrived at the Red River, the boundary between Indian Territory and Texas. She recalled how Cynthia had mentioned the possibility of a rail crew at the border, and indeed, like a colony of ants toiling away at their dusty hill, hundreds of men swarmed around the framework of a bridge under construction. One of the crew bosses greeted her as she approached. "Howdy, ma'am. Don't see a lot of white folks traveling from the north. Pretty thing like yourself in Indian Territory, mighty unusual. Where are you headed?" The man's thick Scottish English made him nearly incomprehensible. "Fort Worth," she said. "Well, that's a good wide trail, ma'am. About a week's travel for you, I reckon. We have riders that make it a lot quicker than that, and wagons going that way now and then. You might join in with some of those boys. Hitch up your mule behind. The wagon boys will get you there in 3 days. Less if the roads ain't washed out. Though I reckon it would be a hard run for your animal. Those wagon boys change teams 3 or 4 times a day. Ever been to Fort Worth?" "No," she said. 5 years ago there wasn't much there. A bunch of scraggling natives, a few soldiers, saloons, and low-down types, maybe 500 folks. Then they finally got things straightened out with a railroad. This time next year, you'll be able to ride from Fort Worth in comfort all the way up to Kansas City or St. Louis, hell, all the way to New York." "You say I might be able to ride aboard a wagon from here?" Even a rough supply wagon sounded luxurious compared to another day astride cotton socks. "Hell yeah, I reckon them boys would be mighty glad to have a pretty lady like you along. They drive their teams hard, though, make 50 or 60 mile a day. You figure your mule can run along at that pace?" I'm not sure." "Well, I'd hitch up with the next bunch heading out. They got some supply wagon or another coming in and out of here a couple of times a week." The man scanned Doreen. "I could check on the next wagon and drop by your tent later," he said with a wink. "I haven't got a tent." I noticed you were traveling light. Paddy Patterson, by the way." The man nudged his mount closer and extended a hand. "I have a couple of extra tents. How about I have a pair of men pitch one of them for you by the river over yonder? Find you a nice quiet spot. We'll even get you a cot to sleep on. Pretty young gal like yourself shouldn't be bunking on the ground." Doreen didn't fail to notice the look in Paddy's eyes. She found the bald Scotsman with his thick accent and bulging gut both unattractive and old. Even so, his offer of a tent and cot sounded irresistible. She knew what she wanted and figured a little roll with the man wouldn't be unbearable. She had planned to become a saloon girl in Fort Worth anyway. Undoubtedly there would be worse than Paddy in a cattle town. "If you plan on climbing into the cot with me, you'd best get yourself bathed and cleaned up before you come." She looked him squarely in the eye. "And I get $4 for a roll." Patterson looked at her for a moment, then smiled broadly. "Hell, I'm giving you a tent and cot. Them gals in Fort Worth don't charge but 4 bits for full service." "I will gladly decline your gift of a cotton tent, and thank you for keeping your affections to yourself then," Doreen said. "I am accustomed to Kansas City, and expect more." "Well, I wasn't planning anything anyhow," Patterson said a little too loudly. "But since you offered, I reckon I got $4 for a roll. You are awful pretty. The tent and cot ain't mine anyway. They belong to the railroad, and they don't give a shit." "The offer is not to be repeated to your friends. I'm traveling to Fort Worth, where I already have a position. I'm not a common bar girl to be passed from one slovenly cowboy to the next. I'm doing this out of courtesy for your gracious offer of the tent." "No, yes, ma'am." Patterson bowed in his saddle. And I reckon I'm honored that a fine lady such as yourself would have me for a little roll. I won't tell any of the other men. No, ma'am." "Good." Cactus Branch, unlike Doreen, felt uneasy about riding directly into the construction works. He had traveled this direction in the past with Jake McQueen, but the bridge was new. He remained on the northern side, hiding in the tall brush, watching pensively as Doreen crossed the bridge. He knew he could not follow without being challenged by one of the crew bosses. If he wanted to cross, he would need to find a fording point elsewhere. Following a game trail that ran along the riverside, he veered into the thicket of switchgrass, cattails, and oak brush. A quarter-mile upstream, he found a rocky promontory and gazed across at the opposite bank, watching steel drivers and rail handlers hard at work. Teams of oxen pulled wagons loaded with lumber, equipment, or debris here and there. Supervisors sat on horses ready to bring the whip down should one of the workers, mostly Chinamen and former slaves, move too slowly. Thanks to spring rains, the river was high. Crossing anywhere but the bridge would be a challenge. Henry didn't want to abandon his notion that Doreen held some special significance in his life, but he had grown weary from his own internal debate on the matter. What if the dreams were meaningless? What if his decision to follow Doreen had been nothing more than a manifestation of his own troubled mind? Perhaps he thought he should find a place to camp for the night, then start for home the next day. Paddy Patterson, an overseer, had permission to requisition items for his crew. The supply clerk, a friend of Paddy's, didn't ask questions, so Paddy, thinking Doreen might make it worth his while, added a galvanized washpan, 2 blankets, a lantern, a half-gallon can of kerosene, and a pillow, along with the tent and cot. When he found her waiting near the bridge, he said, "I scouted out a good spot yonder. hiding off in some trees. It's perched up on a good promontory with a grand view of the river." "I don't plan to be here for long," Doreen said. "You told me there was a wagon going to Fort Worth soon." "Yes, ma'am, that's true enough." An idea had occurred to Patty. "Thing is, pretty gal like you, well, you could make a little spending money with my help, if you had a mind to." When Patty mentioned money, he hit upon a topic that had been troubling Doreen. She had left Abilene so hastily she hadn't considered money. "What are we talking about?" she asked. "Well," Patty chuckled, "like I say, you're a pretty thing. Exceptionally pretty, I'd say. Plus, these fellers are lonely. Truth is, we got several men like me working here, bosses and supervisors and such. As you know, men have needs for health and such, needs only a woman can provide." She looked at him for a moment, then said, "Are you suggesting I work as a common whore?" "No, ma'am," Patty waved his hands. "Well, I mean, not whoring as such. Prostituting would be more like it. We wouldn't have to think of you as no common whore, but rather a fine flower." Patty grinned at his skillful use of language. "Thing is, these men, supervisors and such like me, get paid regular, $25 a week in gold coin, but they ain't got nowhere to spend it. There are a couple of gals working over at the little shed Sven Gutterson set up, but both those women are old and ugly. Sven gets $2 a pop on them. I figure a pretty gal like you could get $2 a pop back in Fort Worth or Kansas City. Hell, anywhere. Sven's girl would have a hard time selling their business for 2 bits in Fort Worth. The thing is, there's a good many fellers here that would pay $3 or even $3.50 for a daisy, like yourself. Shit, I done told you how I'd pay $4. Why do I need your help?" Doreen had already decided that the ill-bred Scotsman might be on to something, though she wasn't certain she wanted to become Patty's business partner. "Well, ma'am, I don't have to tell you these are rough parts. The thing is, in Fort Worth, one of them saloon owners is likely to give you no more than 25 cents on the dollar for your services. Out here we could do a split of, say, 50-50, or I'll see to it none of these colored men or the troublesome kind will harm you none. I got a couple of men to help." She thought about it for a moment and realized Patterson was probably right. She would need a liaison to weed out the undesirables and defend her from the brutish elements that surely existed in a work camp of this size. Patty, despite his doltish manner, might be her best prospect in terms of someone she could manipulate. "I will give you 25%, she said, "and I will collect the money. I will only sleep with the men I wish, and if a man gets rough or refuses to leave, then it will be your job to see to it he goes. Do you understand?" "He ain't got to pay if you says no, does he?" Patterson asked, one eyebrow raised. "No, of course he doesn't have to pay if I say no. However, if he should refuse to pay up front, he must go. Do you feel you're capable of handling these men?" "I reckon it ain't no problem. Still, I'll be needing to hire a couple of others to help. 25% ain't hardly worth my time." "Then I will travel on to Fort Worth with the wagon when it arrives." Doreen used an old business tactic her father had taught her years earlier. By forcing the buyer, in this case Patty Patterson, to make a hasty decision, one could often get them to agree to less than favorable terms. "Do you think I might get an occasional roll?" I mean, as a little sweetener to the deal. Maybe me and my boys could get some now and then. I reckon that would go a long way to making this deal more likable. You and 2 others may enjoy my services for half price once each week. If you want more, you pay just as anyone else would. I am also closed for business when I decide to close. Is that understood? Oh, of course. We don't expect you to work around the clock. How many cowboys you figure you can service in a day? She thought for a moment, but realized she wasn't sure. It didn't matter because her father had taught her not to be distracted in such cases. The price will be $4, she said. That's $1 for you. Tell the men the amount is payable to me up front. I will keep the money and pay you at the end of each day. Do we have a deal? I get $1 for each feller? Patty attempted to calculate the amount in his mind, and then in the air with an invisible pencil. So, if you service 10 men in a day, then that is nearly $10? It's $10 exactly. Doreen wondered how a man so lacking math skills could be working as a supervisor at a construction site. You figure you can service 10 fellers in a day? The number seemed reasonable to Doreen, so she nodded. Yes, I think that's probably about right. Well, sir, Patty wasn't the sharpest knife, but even he recognized that $10 a day would add substantially to his weekly salary. It's a deal, he said. Henry peered through his telescope, watching as Doreen appeared alongside a burly white man with a bald head and a voluminous red beard. The red-haired man helped Doreen pitch a tent, and then together they went inside. Henry chose not to consider what they might be doing. When they reappeared, the man adjusted his belt, mounted his horse, and left. Concealed beneath a chinkapin oak, he watched intently for over an hour. The entire time Doreen sat on a log near her tent, weaving a switchgrass fan. Eventually Henry dozed off. When he awoke, he noticed that another man had joined Doreen. They too went into Doreen's tent, then reappeared a few minutes later. Henry was accustomed to watching as everyone around him experienced life. It wasn't as if he could do anything about the situation. Even so, he felt a twinge of jealousy. As evening approached, he cleared a circular area and made camp. He secured his mules, ignoring the men coming and going from Doreen's tent. He could no longer entertain the eccentric notion that his dreams had special significance. The next morning he would pack his things and return home. You are not to bring any men other than whites, or perhaps Spaniards, Doreen scolded Patty Patterson. Jim's a Frenchie, a Creole. He ain't no darky per se, and he's a fine man. Those are the rules, and don't forget the price is $4. That's another thing. One of the men said you told him it was only $2. Well, now, $4's a steep price. I mean, some of the men ain't paid as well as me. Most of them don't make but $15 a week. If you want to allow them to take your dollar, fine, but I get $3 apiece, and I collect the money. If you want to forego your profit, just tell me before we start. Make sure you tell them I collect the money. Got it? Yes, ma'am, I got it. I ain't hard of hearing. And watch the attitude. Now go on and don't send more than 2 more tonight. Yes, ma'am. I got to say, you got a fine pussy, miss. Don't be an idiot. Doreen rolled her eyes in disgust, waving him away. She had already grown weary of Patty Patterson. The man turned every comment into a sexual innuendo. A half hour or so later, her final client appeared outside her tent. The man who shared Patty's red beard paid his $4 with a smile and introduced himself as Patty O'Shea. "I've about had my share of Patties for the day," Doreen said. The encounter with O'Shea proved uninteresting. Another dim, snorting idiot who finished in 30 seconds and stammered about how beautiful she looked. Half an hour later, Patterson arrived with another Irishman, Tommy or Mickey or Red. She couldn't be sure, but Doreen immediately reminded Patty that she had already seen her last customer. A lengthy bit of coercion and begging ensued, but Doreen remained firm, and the fifth Patty of the day, whatever his name happened to be, left with the promise that he would be first the following evening. As the hour grew late, Doreen thought once more of Abilene and her impromptu exit from town. Her protracted illness following her abortion and the local doctor's solemn prognosis that she would never have children weighed heavily upon her mind. How different things might have been if she had married Roman Cardenas. The handsome gambler had assured her of his love when she told him about her pregnancy. Then Roman disappeared 2 days later. Doreen suspected her father had paid him to leave town. Roman's disappearance, the abortion, the humiliation of her father's switchings, the odious boarding school, all of it filled her with resentment. She resolved not to go crawling back, not yet anyway. She might be spoiled and lack common sense, but she didn't lack will. Even though whoring was disgusting, it had only taken one afternoon to reach that conclusion. At least the men seemed grateful. Plus, in one day, she had collected over $30, as much as many men earn in a month. From her spot atop the wooded knoll, she watched the moon reflecting upon the rippling Ochre River. The sounds of birds and the rushing water calmed her senses. Exhausted from her first day as a working woman, Doreen entered her tent and slept. The more Henry considered his decision to leave the next morning, the more irresolute he felt. As darkness fell, he wished for one final glimpse of Doreen. Perhaps, he told himself, if he could see her up close, then he could resolve the question of whether to stay or go. Unfortunately, crossing the bridge still wasn't possible. There were men out and about, and he would surely be questioned. As for crossing the river in its current state, swollen by spring rain, fording would require his mules. He couldn't risk the animals. Looking at the bridge, an idea of how he might cross occurred to him. The group of men socializing by campfires were some distance from the bridge, and even though a pair of sentries remained, men on horseback carrying lanterns, they didn't seem particularly watchful. So it was easy enough to reach the base of the partially constructed bridge undetected. He had noticed scaffolding beneath the work site during the day. He realized he could probably use some of those wooden structures to aid his crossing. He had brought along a rig he used for dragging felled trees, a rope with a grappling hook at one end. With the hook and line in hand, he waded into the swift current beneath the bridge and cast the hook until it caught on the wooden scaffolding. Pulling himself along, he repeated the process, moving from one point to the next until he reached the other side. During the crossing, a light rain began to fall, accompanied by booming thunder and flashes of lightning. He edged along the river bank until he came to Doreen's camp. Once again, employing the grappling hook, he scaled the 20-foot-high embankment. When he reached the top, he settled into a thicket of brush 30 yards from her tent. Within 5 minutes, the misting rain became a downpour. Patterson had done a solid job of pitching the tent, placing it on a minor hillock between a pair of red oaks so water drained away on all sides, and the trees acted as windbreaks. She couldn't sleep because of the fluttering canvas and thunder, but thanks to the cot, tent, and blankets, she felt warm and dry. It was then that she heard something outside.
"Is this here the tent with the horror?"
Annoyed, she sat up, searching for the lucifers and her lamp. She found the box, but before she could strike a match, the tent flap flew open, revealing an enormous figure silhouetted by a flash of lightning.
"I come to get me some of that pussy."
The man stepped in without an invitation. "What the hell are you doing?"
"I come to get me a little. Get them bloomers off, gal."
"You need to see Mr. Patterson. Come back tomorrow and I'll give you a discount."
"Tomorrow? Hell no. I'm gonna get me a pinch right now. Then we'll see about tomorrow."
"You have to talk with Patterson."
"Patterson said you were closed for the night, but he ain't the boss of me."
"Well, you ain't getting—" Before she could get the words out, the foul-smelling man, another red-haired Scotsman, pulled her from the cot. Doreen screamed, raking her nails across his face.
"I like a little fight. Feisty ones is the best."
The man tore away her undershirt, thrusting his enormous hand into her privates. "Stop! Oh, please! That hurts!" Doreen fought, scratching and biting. "Help! Help!" Then something odd happened. Someone else entered the tent. At first, she thought it must be Patterson. Her would-be rapist stopped, suddenly let out a pained roar, then stumbled backwards.
"What in the holy... God damn it!"
The man flailed about, reaching for something in his back. Then lightning flashed, and Doreen saw the second man silhouetted behind her assailant. A scream caught in her throat as she recognized Henry Walker. Had Henry lassoed her rapist? Meanwhile, the Scotsman windmilled his arms, still reaching for something in his back. Then Doreen realized what had happened. Her assailant had an iron grappling hook attached to a rope, buried in his right shoulder. She screamed as Henry used the device to drag the man from the tent. Through the open tent flap, illuminated by the strobing lightning, she watched as the two men grappled. For a moment, it looked like the Scotsman might get the best of things, but Henry gave the rope a hard jerk, and the red-bearded rapist went to his knees. With a smooth motion, Henry looped the lariat around the man's neck and dragged him toward the embankment. In stop motion, Doreen watched as Henry shoved the man over the edge, then stood there bearing the man's weight, struggling to maintain his footing as the Scotsman twitched and jerked on the line below. She rose from the cot and, oblivious to the rain, crossed to the edge. Her assailant twisted and turned, grasping desperately first at the rope, then for a handhold on the steep, rain-slick embankment. Henry gave the rope a series of tremendous jerks, and like a marionette, the helpless Patty hopped and danced in midair. In less than a minute, the macabre puppet grew still. She watched in horror as Cactus Branch lowered the corpse to the water's edge, then made his way to a spot where cottonwood roots curled down the cliffside. She watched as Henry descended, shoved the dead Scotsman into the Red River, and began trudging along the muddy banks, slipping and sliding as he pulled the floating dead man's remains along behind. She remained there, her body shivering from adrenaline and the soaking rain, until Henry disappeared altogether in the mist and gloom. Henry knew he needed to clear the bridge pilings before he could release the body downstream. The river, swollen by the torrential rain, tried to take the Irishman's body. Henry was forced to loop the rope around his waist to keep from losing control. Tree limbs and other debris rushed by in the surging torrent to his left, and the rope slipped through his one good hand more than once. In the near pitch darkness, he could no longer see the body or much of anything. When he reached the bridge, he waded in up to his waist. He felt the rope go slack and knew the man's body must have caught up against one of the bridge supports. The river flowed with such raging ferocity, Henry could hardly stand. Looping the rope around one of the iron bridge footings, he secured himself. Even so, he knew if the current took him, he might be unable to pull himself to safety. He waded deeper, thinking he must be nearing the river's deepest point. When he glanced back, however, he saw in a flash of lightning that he was less than 30 feet from shore. It was fortunate that the dead Scotsman's body was there. Henry could go no further. Clinging to the rope, he managed to remove the hook from the Scotsman's back. He secured the rope a second time, wrapping it around a bit of scaffolding, then around his waist again to free both his good left arm and his injured right hand. The Scotsman's body was tangled in a mass of limbs. For an interminable 10 minutes, Henry struggled to free the dead man. One by one, he pulled limbs away. Finally, after giving the gruesome mass of mud, tree roots, and human remains a great shove, everything shifted, then broke loose, taking the bearded rapist by the bridge pilings and scaffolding and into the open river beyond. A moment later, Doreen's assailant disappeared altogether, carried away into the black night by the pummeling torrent. As he made his way back to shore, Henry prayed the body would float miles away to a place where the work crew and authorities would never find it, a place where coyotes, buzzards, kites, and worms could pick away at it until nothing remained. Following the disappearance of Henry and the dead Scotsman, Doreen, soaked and shivering, returned to her tent where she huddled on her cot. Thoughts raced through her mind: regrets, recognition of her own foolishness, guilt over her horrific past behavior, terror at the reappearance of Henry Walker, and one odd realization. As she sat weeping, her shivering fight or flight response dissipating, she realized that Henry had saved her life. Could it be the misshapen monster, the man who had inspired such fear, was more than he seemed? Had Henry been watching her since she left Cecil and Cynthia Johnson's ranch? Gradually the rain became a drizzling mist, then stopped altogether. As the skies cleared and stars emerged, alleviating some of the pitch blackness, she gathered her courage and stepped outside. The tent would provide no protection should Cactus Branch return, and the canvas walls felt suffocating. Oddly, she didn't feel particularly frightened. If Henry had been following all this time, there would have been ample opportunity for him to have his way with her already, yet he hadn't. Instead of indulging her fears, Doreen was forced once more to examine her own behavior and her situation. She knew that some men, like the drunken Scotsman, simply took what they wanted. Why had she thought Patterson would protect her? Remaining on her present course would require either a return to Abilene and the humiliation and restrictions her father would surely impose, or she would have to find someone to help her. She needed someone who would be there if another assailant appeared, and she realized an answer had already presented itself. The deformed and psychologically tortured man they called Cactus Branch had saved her, and Doreen sensed he would do so again. She shivered at the thought. In a sense, the thought of Henry still terrified her. Were her fears irrational? If she was honest with herself, she knew Henry had not sexually assaulted her the night she arrived at the Johnson Ranch. She had initiated the encounter. She had called out to Henry that first night. But what of Cynthia Johnson's story about Henry and the two white women that Henry had supposedly raped and killed? The story had terrified her at the time, but thinking back, there were questions about Cynthia's motives. They had been tussling over the broom when Henry arrived and separated them. Had Cynthia recognized that she feared Henry? Could it be that Cynthia, in her desperation to be rid of a troublesome house guest, had invented the story? Doreen considered how Cynthia had seemed almost desperately unwilling to allow her to talk with Cecil about her leaving. Cynthia had good reason to invent a story about Henry. The rancher's wife feared for her own family and would say anything. Riddled with guilt and appalled by her own stupidity, Doreen felt she might cry, but this time she didn't. Everything, all her difficulties, all her suffering, all her angst, everything had been her own fault. The recognition that she had no one to blame but herself felt like an icy bath. It set her teeth on edge and heightened her senses, even though she didn't like what she saw. Seeing herself, admitting her error in judgment clarified things. The question was, would she have the courage to act upon her revelation? Exhausted from all that had transpired, she returned to the tent and huddled once more on the cot. Droplets of rainwater from the trees fell rhythmically atop the tent. She wrapped herself in her blankets and walked outside. It would be daybreak soon. As the first red line of dawn appeared, she called Henry's name, thinking perhaps he might be nearby. There was no answer, so she crossed to the embankment. No signs of struggle remained from the previous night. The river had washed everything downstream. No man or horse could possibly ford the river in this state. Her gaze fell naturally upon the bridge, even though the structure, which would eventually include a road for wagons and a rail line, was only partially complete. Concrete and iron footings already traversed the entirety of the nearly 300-foot-wide Red River. Workers had already assembled scaffolding that allowed passage on horseback to the other side. Illuminated by the halo of light above the forest to the east, she saw a familiar figure. Curved back, one arm held closely to his side, hurrying along. She watched as Henry reached the other side, then turned into the tall switchgrass and cane blanketing the opposite shore. She knew Henry's camp must be there somewhere. Later, when she had a little time to rest and gather her courage, she would cross, look for, and perhaps talk with the odd slave who had protected her from a would-be rapist. She would ask Henry why he had done it. Why had he followed her for so many days? Why had he called her an angel? No matter what he might say in reply, she would ask Henry for his help. Doreen wasn't ready to go back to Abilene. She wasn't ready to admit to her father that she had acted like a fool and needed his help. She would carry through with her plans, despite what her father or anyone wanted.